Put on headphones and find your jam. You need a soundtrack of the rebellion. Give me the Merry Misfits because I want the people who have always struggled to conform. Then I want to figure out what the agenda is. But you know what? I don't want to conference and workshop that to death. Martin Luther King, he showed up and said, I have a dream. He didn't say I have a 10-point plan. And don't give me this nonsense about how people have to get themselves cleaned up to move forward with housing in life. I just happen to think recovery works best if people decide that they want to recover. But they'll say, but you're in favor of housing first. And I'll say, I sure am, but you know what the problem is? This is what I say housing first is in a nutshell, and it's easier to remember. It's somewhere to live, something, and some.
We're making it socially acceptable to warehouse humans.
If we really care about homelessness, if we really care about trying to solve a complex issue, then I have to realize
the American Evangelical Church could solve homelessness tomorrow.
Yes, and corporate America could decide to end homelessness. If the tech sector decided that they wanted to put their power behind social issues, things like using AI to better understand risks in neighborhoods of homelessness and those sorts of things. But what's missing here, I think, is
I have mad love for our next guest. This interview, I don't even know how to describe. Iain De Jong is a leading expert on homelessness in United States, Australia, Canada, and I'm sure a lot of other places. All these podcasts are amazing. This one is going to blow you away. You're extremely smart. You travel more than I do. You see homelessness at the ground level and at the 30,000 feet level. Unlike many, I know you're out on the streets talking to homeless people. I'm scared of what's happening in the homeless sector.
Me too.
Explain that.
You know, it's interesting because I'm on Eastern time, but I'm on kind of a weird vibe. And so I was up super early this morning. And that's usually when I go out. Part of it is I need to get exercise. And part of it is every now and then you find someone who's up at that time of day who's looking to chat, and there isn't a whole bunch of the world going on. And every time I'm in town for whether it's a conference or if I'm doing a training or whatever, and I just chat with people about how do they see the world of service delivery. And I can kind of filter through the BS at this point in my career. But I think what's really challenging for me is the hopelessness that exists on the streets now. If you would have said, what do you hear 5-10 years ago? Probably the same sort of thing you would hear, Mark, when you were doing street interviews or handing out socks or whatever, is that people were having some tough times, but they were hopeful for the future, right? That they were going to get through, that they were going to pull through, and they didn't always know how, and sometimes the stories were completely fantastic, but there was hope. And I would say, if I had to say with my gut where people are at, is that people on the streets are losing hope. And they're not losing hope because of whatever the drug of the day is, and they're not losing hope because of just the affordability issues. They're just losing hope in society. Society is like this collective voice of the us's out there, not just the Marks and the Ians who work in the space, but society. Do we care for our fellow human beings? Do we believe in a collective future that has possibility? And when I take that voice of the street up to the direct service level, and you talk to an outreach worker or you talk to a shelter worker, they're crispy.
Right.
And I think that crispiness sometimes is almost playing itself out with the people that they serve now. Like they don't know who else to be upset with, or they don't know what to deal with their burned outness. So like their tempers are short and their patience is thin.
Right.
And then you go to that executive director level, and they're like, during the pandemic, there was more money than they'd ever seen in the sector, but no workforce to implement it with. And now the money is dried up, the workforce is burned out, people are losing hope at the time that John and Jane Q. Public are finally pissed off about homelessness because they're seeing it at volumes that they've never seen it before. And it's become partisan, right? It used to be, I remember one of the hook lines, I used to love it, and this is going back to the Bush administration and the USICH at that time. And dude was like making the rounds, and he says, homelessness is one issue where we can focus on partnership, not partisanship.
Ooh.
And I just thought, oh, dude, you're a Republican, and I dig that. I mean, not that I have political affiliation. I'm Canadian, for God's sake. But you get to that point where you say, it is now partisan. It's not partnership.
Yeah.
And now it is territorial, and it's you versus I. And who suffers in all that? It's the dude outside Denny's a few blocks from here at 3:30 in the morning, completely dope sick, who's yearning for someone to talk to, who wants something to believe in. And we can't get our heads out of our arses and figure out how to get along to deal with that bigger society issue. And that frustrates the crap out of me. It makes it harder sometimes to be hopeful with myself.
Yeah.
We're at an era of polarization, of partisanship, of apathy or frustration. We're at a point of anger without resolve. And we're in a time where if we can't figure out what the next steps are, then there's no point in us having a sector. There's no point in us convening for conferences.
I feel we're in a pinnacle moment that what happens maybe in the next 6 months, but definitely within the next couple of years, we may never get a chance to recover.
Oh,
I feel a sense of urgency that opposition to housing, the people supporting criminalization, conversation of forced internment camps, which I never thought would ever come on,
yeah.
is getting so loud that we may never get a chance to swing back. But I see us kind of stuck on stupid,
Yeah.
and I think everybody's feeling the sense of urgency. They're definitely feeling the crispy if they don't feel the urgency.
Yeah.
This work has never been easy.
Never.
Never been easy, but it's never been this hard, and it's getting harder. And the hard part for me is the moral looking at it and going, gosh, I know people have different opinions, right? I like different opinions. It's how I learn and grow. But these people do not care about humans.
No.
And they're willing to be dishonest to push whatever agenda they want.
Well, and I think there is something to be said for getting to like parts of America that are really rural, really poor, and yet really aligned to this idea that our community would be better if we can just otherize at least someone, right? That we need a villain to make us feel better about our own state of poverty, I guess, or our own lack of hopefulness for the future. And who's left to villainize, right? I mean, society will continue to otherize certain groups, but to otherize homelessness as a collective across the age spectrum, families, couples, and individuals, youth and adults, like it used to be. And I suspect you can remember, there was a time where you'd look around, it was basically men, right? And there were detached men who, for a whole host of reasons, were holed up at the mission.
3 hots and a cot.
That's it, man. And then it became, okay, well, now there's women. And then there was more women. And then it was, okay, well, now there's some couples. And there's always been families, but never at the place where we've seen it before.
And family homelessness is exploding.
It's not just at the family shelters or the hotels and motels. It's the RVs. It's the family of 6 living in a sedan. It's out by some, beach or Walmart parking lot or whatever the case may be. And you look around and, I'll go back to rural America and say they used to have, I would say, a sense of compassion, but now these groups, these well-funded groups have influenced political leaders at a county level, right down sometimes to the town, hamlet, or city level, certainly at the state level, to say, oh, I've got the solution for y'all. The solution is we just need them to get to the edge of county, live in these internment camps, and get to work. What we need to do is we need to socially program an agenda that is going to focus on wellness, and this language that they use around that is going to be safer and more therapeutic. Yeah. That it is driven by this like impulse to see betterness in others, is so attractive. Yeah. This is the part where I'll say it doesn't matter if it's like a large metropolitan area or a county that maybe has 400 people and maybe more horses than people in it. You get to some of those places and they're like, yeah, you know what? This is the best way. And the other thing that I hear, I suspect you hear some of it too, is, well, if what y'all have been talking about worked, we wouldn't be in the situation. Yeah. So what I'm going to present to you as this well-funded outfit is the alternative to the stuff that sucks. And the suckage that they show is such a gross manipulation of data and a gross distortion of what's really happening, but is packaged so eloquently.
Brilliant, actually. I mean, some of it makes me so mad, but as a marketer and a messenger and communicator, I'm going, that's brilliant.
Genius. And then you end up in some of these, like, I'll talk about like public meetings for a housing development, right? Or a shelter. I've been to too many of those in my life. And they're pulling this stuff up off the internet as if it's fact. Right? Some of this data and whatever.
Facts don't matter.
And the facts absolutely don't matter. What matters is a positioning. And then they'll push it back to you and they'll say, well, don't you think that people should focus on recovery? And I'll say, I absolutely am supportive of recovery. I just happen to think recovery works best if people decide that they want to recover. But they'll say, but you're in favor of housing first. And I'll say, I sure am. But you know what the problem is?
Invisible People is a nonprofit media publisher working to change the story of homelessness to influence policy change. We do videos and journalism and advocacy to help fight criminalization and to help fix the affordable housing crisis. But we can't do it without you. We need your support. Please consider giving a gift of any size, or if you can, please become a monthly donor. Invisible People is not me, it's we. You are the most important part of Invisible People. And together, we can make a difference.
I just happen to think recovery works best if people decide that they want to recover. But they'll say, but you're in favor of housing first. And I'll say, I sure am. But you know what the problem is? The problem is there's too many people out there using the phrase housing first without a clue what it means. They don't actually do it right. And it doesn't work the way that they're describing it. And then people come back and say, what you're doing isn't working. And so, I don't know, man. I'm all over the place and I'm frustrated. But I guess that's the message.
When my current talk on messaging, and it started when NEH asked me to speak about housing first, messaging housing first. I first start off with a photo of my homeless friend Rocky, who went into housing first, and for whatever reason, they let her sit there for over a year. Nobody went to visit her. So when I went to go see, now I would go see her from time to time, and I would ask her about her case management. She didn't know. She didn't know somebody was supposed to come see her. So the couple below them, same housing provider, lived for a year without a refrigerator or a bed. I took care of that, right? So Rocky, didn't know, so I automatically assumed they're taking care of her. And I went to go visit her. She's sleeping out in the yard. She's got her stuff packed. She's gained 100 pounds. And she's just not in right mind.
Yeah.
So I contacted the housing provider. And I said, Rocky's in a bad shape. Are you guys visiting her? And they looked it up. And, and the outreach worker circumvented something because there was a housing opening. I get it, right? They wanted them in housing, so she didn't get put on the list for to go in and visit her for services. And why I put up that slide is there's no messaging in the world, an op-ed, a TikTok, or a video podcast that will convince the public that housing first is a solution until we fix housing first.
Well, dude. Messaging matters. Obviously, you know this more than most people in the sector. But I've got to the point where, if people ask me to give a talk on housing first, I will give the entire talk without saying housing first. Or I will say, this is what housing first really is. Is this what you're doing it? But if we have to make it simple for people, this is what I say housing first is in a nutshell. And it's easier to remember. It's somewhere to live, something to do, and someone to love. And if you can figure out the somewhere to live part, but forget the something to do and someone to love part, then you're not doing housing first.
I'm stealing that.
You can have it.
I know. You can give me your stuff. I stole your somebody's brother, somebody's sister many years ago. But I wanted to ask you, the last time I heard you speak, you did a great little segment about if somebody came into the emergency room.
Yeah. I've tried to explain throughout the years what it truly means to be non-judgmental. Because there's so many in our field who love that phrase, right? We're accepting of everybody. We'll meet people where they're at. And then also decide to leave them where they were. But that's a different story for a different day. But this idea of non-judgmental. So it goes like this. Mark, if you had a heart attack this morning, and I don't wish that upon you, but if you had a heart attack this morning, let's assume that there's someone who rushed you to the hospital, right? And they get you to the emergency. And the first thing that they do when they get to the emergency, they wouldn't make you step on a scale to see if you're overweight. Even though, I mean, there's lots of documentation, lots of evidence that shows being overweight is bad for heart health. We would never say, you've got to lose 30 pounds, then we're going to help you with your heart. If you were a smoker and you had a heart attack and you got rushed to the hospital this morning, we don't say, Mark, we want to help you, but you got to prove to us you've been smoke-free for 30 days. Then we'll help you with your heart attack. We wouldn't do that to you. If you, at that moment of having had a heart attack because of the pain in your chest, dropped an F-bomb or two in the emergency, we're not going to give you the boot, right? We're going to still help you with your heart attack. If you once killed someone, and you have a heart attack, when you get to the hospital, you don't say, oh, I'm sorry, man. We have a strict eye for an eye policy. You killed someone, therefore we can't do anything for you. And if you were having your fourth heart attack, we wouldn't say, buddy, you've had 3 chances. Clearly you don't care about your heart. So you could be an overweight smoking jerk who once killed someone having your fourth heart attack. You'd still be a priority for services. We don't say change who you are so I can give you what you need. We say you are who you are and I'm going to give you what you need. And until we can get it through people's skulls that people are who they are, and don't give me this nonsense about how people have to get themselves cleaned up to move forward with housing and life. If we really care about homelessness, if we really care about trying to solve a complex issue, then I have to realize that my capacity to serve you has to be rooted in a love that only knows radical acceptance. And if I actually live radical acceptance, if I actually accept that your life is just as valuable as mine, if I am totally anchored in compassion, I realize this work is never going to be a relationship between healer and wounded. It's a relationship between equals. It's only when I know my own darkness that I can be present in the darkness of others. And when I know that darkness in the presence of others, at least I can say to them, hey, buddy, I know how to turn on the lights. I know the way out. Sorry, I got kind of worked up.
No, I was blown away. It's even better the second time. And it's so true because we put so many conditions on people. And I think, we talked about 3 hots and a cot, and a lot of that division, you have this side that still rests on this old religious programming.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it shaped that. I mean, some of it is that they figured out a way to weaponize the criminalization rhetoric so that they can pander to voters. You feel like you're hitting the wall all the time now.
This idea of salvation is just packaged a different way, isn't it? I want to be really clear on this point because this is often misinterpreted. I think religious organizations can play a role in responding to homelessness. What I don't believe in is that people's vulnerability is the best opportunity for evangelization.
Bam.
And let's also be clear, the majority of what is labeled as faith-based organizations are Christian organizations. So it might be misleading to just say faith-based, like what we should just call the majority anyway, Christian organizations. And for those who want to live in that way, fill their boots. Like, honest to goodness, if that brings them joy, if they feel that they're living what they would describe as gospel values, I got no grudge with that. What I have an issue with is me saying that the cure to your condition is only found through one pathway, as opposed to the cure for your condition can come to be nurtured by this belief and worship and fellowship and community. But homelessness is not a sin. At least I don't think it is.
Well, not for the person experiencing homelessness, but for the fuckers that are not doing anything to help them, I think that's a sin.
Oh, listen. So you said something earlier which really resonated with me. You said something to the effect of, urgency.
Yeah.
Right? We got to act with urgency, but not with haste. Right? And this idea of the hastiness with which I can just patch my salvation into your program and show you, hey, there's life off the street. I mean, you've been to a gazillion missions. Well, that's probably an exaggeration, but dozens, if not hundreds, throughout the country. You know they're not all the same.
I lived in a church for 7 fucking years.
Yeah, you know they're not all the same. There are some Christian organizations out there who I would give my time and attention to all day long. Yeah. Not because I have the same religious beliefs as them, but I believe in the work that they're doing and truly meeting people where they're at. But the ones that are all, I think, some of the same group that is inciting this feeling of safety risk, of sinfulness, of debauchery, of what I can describe as clusterfuckery, is just going to lead to doom and despair of the masses. And they're going to put it into their Sunday talks and sermons, and it will no longer be around, bless the poor and let's be mindful of people less fortunate than ourselves. Love that expression. It'll be, let us be scared of them and pray that when they're on the edge of town that they find their way, a pathway to righteousness, and that their Lord and Savior will bring them to a place where all is well and good in the world, that they will be practiced. So let us remember that on the edge of the county, there are those who need our prayers.
The American Evangelical Church could solve homelessness tomorrow if it wanted to. And a bunch of other social crises, if it wanted to. They have the real estate, they have the funding.
Yes, and corporate America could decide to end homelessness.
Yeah.
If it wanted to.
Yeah. So we could decide to end.
Back to our first topic about hopefulness in society, right? Now, I'm not trying to dish your point in terms of
no. I get. No, I'm glad
churches.
You did a new framing.
Is that there are different entities that are powerful entities. Like here we are in the Bay Area, right? There's more tech in this area, and probably more really well-paid software engineers and the like in this area than any other part of the country. If the tech sector decided that they wanted to put their power behind social issues, and I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about things like using AI to better understand risks in neighborhoods of homelessness and those sorts of things. If there was the power of good and a willingness, but what's missing here, I think, is a coherent agenda. Right? Why would anybody want to get involved in ending homelessness right now? It's not glamorous. It is completely partisan. It gets mixed up with all sorts of other social issues all the time. It has a known cure. It's called housing, but no one seems to want to build it. And it's not just the NIMBYs. It is absolutely the bananas, which is the build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. It is this desire to create the enclaves away from, downtown urban centers. I mean, I think that when people say, I don't feel safe downtown anymore because look at all the people who are like homeless and living in tents and those sorts of things downtown, I will say, what a better reason for us as a community to all go downtown and lift people up. I don't mean physically lift people up, but lift people up by our presence and let them know that they are part of our community. So as soon as we start distancing ourselves and otherizing, whether it is the evangelical Christian movement not getting involved, or corporate America, or even making it a political priority, the cure to homelessness is not unknown.
A related aside, something I don't talk about publicly a lot because it just doesn't come up.
So let's put it on a podcast.
You have the Bezos and the Zucks are now getting into philanthropy.
Yeah.
Right. And so let's take Bezos for example. What made Amazon so great is he became an expert at systems and logistics.
Yeah.
Right? And customer service.
Yeah.
Right? He put them all together, right? And just grew this massive company. So then now he takes his billions and he hires experts on how to give the money away.
Yeah.
Where Bezos, if he came in, like, I'm not saying the money's not needed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Keep giving, right? If he came in with his Amazon executives and said, okay, this homeless sector, you guys, you're not running efficiently.
Yeah.
Here's what you need to do to streamline, save money, and have better outcomes. The Bezos and the Zuckerbergs could really significantly solve homelessness without even spending their money, just by using their expertise.
Can you imagine whether it's an Amazon, a Meta, a Google, Alphabet, whatever, if we said, can you design coordinated entry?
And for those that don't know what that is,
it is supposed to be matching the right person, couple, or family to the right housing and support opportunity in the right order.
But people...
What it's become is a glamorized wait list to nowhere.
It's going to have a different definition, but explaining that because nonprofits don't have equal resources.
Okay, but let's back it up a little bit on this one, because I
Sure.
think that your listener might need to understand a little bit about the mechanics of how the system part works of homelessness.
Yeah.
Right? Which is one of the great advents has been this idea that, and this is my words, not any bureaucratic words, that there are some households that, if not for us determining that they were priorities for housing, would always be dismissed as too high needs or too dysfunctional or too something, not deserving.
Right.
So coordinated entry, in my mind, was let's take really vulnerable people and make sure people have to pay attention to really vulnerable people. I love that. I absolutely think that is an really noble idea to pursue. However, you know what they say an elephant is? It's a mouse designed by committee. What it's become is a super bloated big thing, and it started with some people saying, well, we need a list of everybody experiencing homelessness in real time. And from the early days, I would say that is ridiculous because it's totally fluid. Plus, you need people's consent to be on a list. Like, someone actually has to say, put me on a list. You can't just go around adding people to a list, right? And then they said things like, well, now we will always know in real time exactly how many housing units we need and how many shelter beds we need and how many outreach workers we need. And I would say funding cycles don't work in real time. Right? Funding cycles are annual. So you might have better data for predicting how much of those resources you need, but you're not going to change the number of shelter beds in real time. That's preposterous. Plus, what do we know when we look at data? I mean, real data from the system is that there's a huge chunk of people who self-resolve, and perhaps a bigger concern that we don't talk about enough in the sector, there's a whole bunch of people out there that touch the homelessness system that then have whereabouts unknown. We have no idea where they ended up. Did they end up incarcerated? Maybe, but we don't have a linked data system.
Whoa. So the data just goes into a black hole?
Into a Mark Horvath. He is staying at our shelter. Oh, it is the next day. Mark Horvath isn't here. Where did Mark Horvath go?
The black hole.
Alien abduction? I don't know, but he's not here. And the other thing is the data systems aren't linked across different communities. So for all I know, you decided San Jose was nicer than San Francisco and found a way down to San Jose. We don't know, right? We just don't know. So when we have these lists that have really become exercises in bureaucracy, not about housing, and it's gotten us away from what I'll say is the old school approach, and I'm not one of those people who's like all nostalgic for the good old days, but I will say when I came into this work, if you wanted to get someone housed who was really struggling, you rolled up your sleeves and you figured out how to advocate and figure out their strengths and showcase those strengths and polish those strengths and get people to be the best version of themselves. That's how you made it work. And when I think of it now, which is you wait for your number to come up on a list, and then we assign you to someone that you've never met, and to your friend of, or the person that you reference that didn't have a support worker visiting them in their apartment. We can't just trust that systems are going to figure those things out. Two things I know for sure. One, systems are dumb. And two, organizations are more interested in self-preservation than they are in the people that they serve too often.
Oh my gosh.
Never underestimate an organization's desire for self-preservation.
I worked at a place in Los Angeles. Preservation was, keep the lights on, keep the doors open.
Yep.
So you got to get this grant.
Yep.
And the grant, had, you have to have 3 veterans and 1 mental illness or whatever.
Yeah.
Pretty specific, right?
Yeah.
And in the city that I worked in, there was no homeless veterans.
Uh-oh.
So they put an ad in the paper.
Oh, dear Lord.
I swear to God. Are you homeless? Are you homeless? Because they want the money.
Yeah.
And then I saw, they went all the way to West Hollywood and got a grant for outreach. Mm-hmm. And that's an 1.5-hour drive. So you have an outreach van that's now on the road 3 hours out of every day.
Yeah.
Instead of but they probably were the lowest bidder.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And I can't fault the executive director because she's trying to keep the lights on. And, there's over here in West Hollywood, and it's totally inefficient.
Yeah.
And you can multiply that as what's happening on a bigger scale and sometimes a small scale.
Oh, okay. Man.
Did I wind you up?
Well, you're doing a good job of it. I see. Okay. I see. I see. So first thing I'll say is that I'm a nerd, right? And it took me a long time to just be clear publicly that I'm a real nerd. And one of the things that the Alliance was originally attracted about my skill set was my nerdiness, right? That I could talk around performance and data and how to use informed decision making. And so I'm going to fully articulate what I think occurred as succinctly as possible. The desire to make sure that we had good performing organizations led to an increase in competition. So I'll say the first part was good. The premise that good performing organizations should be rewarded and that bad serving organizations should just have tough beans, I'm on board with. I don't think we should continue to perpetually fund bad performing organizations.
Yeah.
However, what we did was created an incentive for people to go after grants in West Hollywood that are an 1.5 hours away from where their organization is through competition of low bid equals better service. And I think what we've done in the space of competition is also said at times that that volume is more important than quality, right? And so one of the things that, like in the shelter environment nowadays, with communities that are trying to expand shelters really, really, really quickly, and this is going to come back to this like argument around performance, is it's no longer who's the best shelter provider. It's who can take in the most bodies for the least amount of money.
Right.
Right? And because cities are saying we don't have the money, or counties are saying we don't have the money, or states are saying we don't have the money, but we need to get people off the streets. But by the way, we want you to make this low barrier because they read somewhere that low barrier is good, right? But we don't want to give you the staffing resources to actually do high quality, safe low barrier. Right. So you end up with these like I was hearing from a service provider earlier today. They were essentially saying their campus now has, I think, they were saying over 500 or over 600 people a night and 3 staff. Right? It's become competition to get the resources to warehouse people rather than to serve people.
Which is why the tiny shacks are growing.
Oh, we're just going for every hot button issue here. I love this. So let's talk about the tiny shacks.
Yeah.
So people say tiny homes, tiny homes, tiny homes, tiny homes. And I will say, okay, can you define what that is for me? Because let me tell you some of the experiences I have. I've seen LEED certified that is built at more dollars per square foot than multi-unit residential construction typically is done. Gorgeous. Like they would be featured on Home and Garden television. And I've seen, honest to God, Home Depot prefabricated sheds that people call tiny homes. And my favorite, which is north of where we're at right now, what I called coffins on stilts. Which were essentially like 3 foot by 8 foot by 4 foot high, put up on 2x4s to get them off the ground. They got them off the ground.
Better than the tent.
I don't know why I didn't think that was such a good idea. And I asked a question like, in the event of a fire, how would someone get out of here? Oh, you don't ask those questions. People should just be grateful that they had a place to be.
Pallet shelter business has increased 7,000%. And one, like, I know of a politician, or I heard of a politician in I won't say the state, but they invested in one of these pallet shelter villages, and then they're pushing for criminalization. There was somebody here, or at the Oakland NEH, who had bought a pallet shelter village. And he was going around, hey, do you know anybody sober that you can get, because he wanted to fill it up, because they're going to make money from it.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, to me, what is really scary is it's the path to that internment camp.
Yeah.
And we're making it socially acceptable to warehouse humans. And the least amount of money, where I was going, because you brought that up, it's like, they're criminal drug addicts. They did this to themselves. We're not going to spend money. Let's get them the least amount of help that, we can push to the public. We're not, where I'm going.
Oh, yeah. Where we, again, back to duping the public on the response to homelessness, which is, I think, leading to some of the society pushback in terms of the response, has been that we've sold this idea that if we build a nice pallet shelter community or a tiny home community, homelessness will go down. So not appreciating the fluid dynamics of homelessness, one. And two, that people still have agency, right? So they still have independence, and they still have, I know this freaks some people out, but people who are homeless still have rights. So people can decide, I don't want to live in this tiny village. I don't like my neighbors, or I don't like the programming, or I don't like the shared bathroom, or whatever is going on, depending upon, because, they're all quite different. Some are lovely and well-managed and great support, and other ones are crap, but not every place is for every person. And then some people will leave. And then the public will say, well, I supported your tiny village, but I still see people in my park. So your tiny village, just didn't work. And it was like, that's when I'll go back to, we need to understand, back to the numbers game and the investment, that if you really want to invest in solutions, you can't have all your money go into one thing like a tiny village, tiny home village, and assume that's going to be the answer.
But when the tiny village fails, they can blame it on the homeless person. They're service resistant.
Well, yeah, they are service resistant, or they were self-sabotaging, Mark. I say with dollops of sarcasm. Or that they, the fault wasn't the tiny home. The fault was that they didn't try hard enough in the tiny home, which I think is akin to, the issue wasn't the chemo, Mark. The issue is you didn't try the chemo hard enough. And if you just tried the chemo harder, your cancer would be better.
What are the lessons we can learn? And give us some hope. What are some bright spots?
Tonight in America, there will be tens of millions of people experiencing economic poverty. There will not be tens of millions of people experiencing homelessness. Most poor people figure out their housing situation. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's safe. I'm not saying it's ideal. But the reality is mutual aid and people's resilience tends to be the reason why most people don't come seeking shelter beds, historically. And I have sold that over and over again, not as trying to not build affordable housing, but to say, hey, communities, you don't have to sit on your hands and wait for new housing to be built to get people housed. What you need to go is go to your low-income neighborhoods, not your government-assisted housing, but go to your poor neighborhoods, stand at a bus stop, and ask people, how do you figure out your housing without us? Because you figure this out all the time and you never need us. And if I just knew how you did it, I would replicate it with the people I'm trying to serve. Right? This idea that economically poor people are somehow stupid or misguided or poor with or terrible with money management is just such a load of horseshit. You know who's great at money management? Poor people, because they can get by every single month on an amount that I can't even fathom. It is ridiculous. It is absurd. It is mind-boggling that we continue to have in this day and age the depth of despair amongst economically poor people, but most of them aren't going to experience homelessness. Right. Now things are changing. Now it really is, oh my goodness, my landlord jacked up my rent to the point where I can't figure out how to scrape together these nickels to make this work. It is the person living with an addiction who before could probably figure out enough things. Yeah. You know, sometimes even engaging in sex work or under the table labor or dealing, low level dealing, whatever, to try to get by, where they can't make it work economically with the rent costs anymore. We're in a new reality. Yeah. But I would still say, and it's similar with the 10-year plans and the work on like gender justice and orientation justice and racial justice, that we have to be able to build housing and work on those things at the same time. It's not an either or.
And we're running out of time. I feel, going back to earlier, I think we're at that pinnacle moment that we have to make some of these changes, which are going to be hard because we're going to have to, give up our egos, collaborate, admit we're wrong, learn new things, and work together.
Yeah, and figure out, like, working together, I think, has to be a willingness to put our energies towards a common aim. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure we have a common aim right now as a sector. I think we have multiple aims co-occurring, some of which intersect, some of which are pointed in the right direction. Yeah. Like, what was so great for those that have been at this work for 10, 20 years is we can remember when the conversations did start to shift from managing homelessness to ending homelessness. Right? That was a huge shift.
Yeah. I actually remember that.
And I remember my direct service days, and that was our entire philosophy on street outreach, right? We are no longer managing unsheltered homelessness. We're no longer just handing things out. We are going out and we're going to house people. We are going to end this. And being a champion of that cause. And now I think it's like we're going to end homelessness, and we're also going to figure out respite care, and we're also going to figure out prison discharges, and we're also going to figure out the child welfare system, and we're also going to figure out economic participation in the labor force and a whole bunch of other things. I'm like, I don't know if we as a sector have the capacity to do all that. I mean, we are so small. And in terms of running out of time, not just on this podcast, I'm sure, but in terms of the sector and you saying, 6 months to 2 years, I will say we will know by this time next year how screwed we are.
I feel that.
Because part of it will be political. And I don't just mean the federal election in the United States. Part of it will be what's happening at counties and state levels with alternate narratives about how to respond. And I think that's really playing itself out in a lot of states this year. And we'll get some sense. I think the Supreme Court decision in the United States is going to lay the groundwork for what's possible and impossible in the space of responding. Yeah. And I think that if we do move towards policies of internment camps and those sorts of things, or equivalents of whatever they get called, that we're going to know by this time next year. And here's what scares the bejesus out of me. Well, one of the things that scares the bejesus out of me. Can you imagine if this conference was replaced with, or ever became so how do you operate a better internment camp? Right? How's your internment camps? Are your state's internment camps? Are they doing a really good job? What is your labor force participation rate? What are your sobriety rates?
When you said that, the first impression was shock, but then I actually want to cry because it's not that far off.
No, it's not. And if it's not this movement, there will be a counter movement, and they will have national conferences.
Yeah.
About rates of rehabilitation.
Yeah.
And did you get did you get a state infrastructure project for your internment camp? We did. We're building new roadways. We're clearing trees. We're tilling fields. We're taking care of brownfield remediation. Yeah. All with what? The labor of people who didn't have a place to live.
So how do we fight it? What can people do? Give me something that people watching this, listening. I always say, educate yourself, get politically active, and support your local nonprofits. Because I don't have anything else.
Okay, so I'll take a slightly different approach, which is put on headphones and find your jam. And I'm not saying that to be facetious, but you need a soundtrack of the rebellion, right? And I don't care if it's, Rage Against the Machine or some pop flavor du jour, but something that just gets your heart beating, that says, this is the beat of my rebellion. This speaks to me. That's number one. And I'm not being silly on that. Number two, once you get to the soundtrack of your rebellion, then you find the people that you want to rebel with. And that's where I will always say, give me misfits. Give me merry misfits. That's how we describe ourselves at Orco. Give me the merry misfits, because I don't want the people who know how to conform. I want the people who have always struggled to conform. I want the people who have been told that they don't fit in. I want the people who have been told that they're nothing. I want the people who are told that they can't work because of their mental illness or whatever else is going on. I want those people. And then I want to figure out what the agenda is. But you know what? I don't want to conference and workshop that to death. When I find the people in my rebellion, and it's said really well better in It Starts With Why. But this idea of when Martin Luther King marched on Washington, he showed up and said, I have a dream. He didn't say, I have a 10-point plan, right? And I got to know what that dream is, because I'm going to believe in that dream. Yeah. And if I can, I'm not saying that I don't know who it is that leads us in the moment, but we need someone. We need a champion who can lead us to a dream of what's next, and can actually convince with enough profile and is willing to take the flack along the way. And I'm going to say, Mark, that it's not going to be you or I, right? The battle is going to be led by the voice of resistance of the generation that is younger than us, who essentially says, this is the future that I want. Because people like us, I'm feeling a bit these days like a 7-day-old cow patty, right? Which is, my utility is only to nourish the soil. It's to do nothing else. Yeah, right. And I think now I'm just here to nourish the movement. I'm here to tell people all the mistakes I've made, and I'm here to teach people what I've got. But my days of being the rabble-rousers, I used to be the guy, you once described me as the Howard Stern of ending homelessness, which at one time made me giggle, made me delighted, and offended me all at the exact same time. Yeah. But it's because I was like your shock DJ. I was the guy who would say the things that other people were thinking but couldn't say. Exactly. And I would make people feel uncomfortable. And then I would get asked to go to communities and say those things to make a whole bunch of people feel uncomfortable. Right. And you know what that's resulted in after all these years? A whole bunch of people who hate my motherfucking guts, right? The number of people out there who write vile things about wanting my wife dead or telling me that I should commit suicide. That is what our sector has become. Yeah. Right, is just this idea of like taking people who might have had a voice and turn them into punching bags. Yeah. For what purpose? Not to build each other up, but to make themselves feel better. Yeah. So I'm willing now. Now I feel like I've entered into a bit of the elder statesperson role in all of this, which is...
And you're wearing it well.
I'm just going to tell people what I've learned. I'm going to tell people my mistakes. My favorite presentation that I hardly ever get asked to make, my favorite presentation is top 10 mistakes I've made in my career.
Wow. I remember you did that in a blog post.
Yeah, and well, I've advanced since then.
It was you haven't blogged in a while.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anybody's blog is a. We've got to go, but I got to end by. What's your 3 wishes?
About the sector?
Anything. 3 wishes. The genie's rubbing the pot.
Yeah.
You got open 3 wishes.
I got 4 kids. Last year, I spent over 300 nights away from home. Wish number 1 is when my kids are grown up, I want them to think that their dad's life work was worth it. That's wish number 1. Wish number 2, did we have the right rebellion with a kick-ass soundtrack? And 3rd, and it's a big wish, that the success of us as a society truly is only going to be measured not by what we were able to accomplish when times were easy, but what we were able to accomplish with complex social issues when times were hard. And I want us to be victorious in succeeding in ending homelessness.
Wow. Ian, thank you.
My pleasure, Mark.
Well, it was a big risk, but you've always been encouraging me in these risks. So thank you.
I believe in invisible people, and I believe in you.
Well, thank you.